There's a lot of movement and change in the free will versus determinism subject matter. And a lot of it sort of revolves around definitions because reality changes as reality changes. But we change our minds about talking about reality a lot quicker, and there's a lot more fluidity than objective reality has, okay? Basically, it's situational, and there's a lot of factors that come together in sort of a condition or a recipe of determinism versus freedom in the moment, because they come together in such a way that the percentage of determinism versus the percentage of freedom shifts around. You'll sort of hear people say it's situational a lot. It's situational because of the percentages that shift around. So just to say it's all this or it's all that is really sort of like self-serving conceptual wishful thinking. You know, it's like, I want to rest my mind, so I'm going to put everything in this basket and call it a day. But hey, you know, reality's not really like that, is it? It's always changing. But our definitions don't always have to change, you know? We can come to a sound conclusion, even though the sound conclusion may be complex. And so, you know, that's what these videos are sort of about in some way. It's pretty obvious that we can't just do whatever we can imagine with our imaginations. Oftentimes, the path we take in life is multiple choice, and that's the extent of your will. You've been presented with these options that developed as part of larger systems, which you may have contributed to, but have effectively manifested themselves into what they are outside of your control. Now you must choose from the options presented. Is that what you would call freedom? You know, multiple choice, you had the freedom. Is that the same freedom that, say, an artist has in creating a picture or creating a piece of art, where it's complete freedom to do whatever you want given the limitations or creations that you give yourself? And I'm not implying that you create your own reality in any way. There's a lot of determinism out there, but I'm just saying there are conditions that you can create that give you the utmost freedom within those conditions. You know, a lot of times it is multiple choice. Now you must choose from the options presented. How we define freedom and determinism will condition the answers we give about it. Much of it revolves around a stable reality that we all agree upon based on intersubjective and scientific observations, but the way we define and characterize it varies wildly and is fluid. And there's a lot of people contributing to it. For me, the amount of freedom we have is situational. Sometimes we create situations for ourselves that we have maximum control over, maximizing our free choice. Sometimes, no matter how hard we try, we are dominated by determinism. And I'm seeing like a little pattern here, something that I call lensing. Lensing is basically where you take a subject and its antithesis, maybe like the first part of a dialectic, and then you affirm and deny it in sort of like a quad format. So here's how it goes. It's for this subject, the first one is situational freedom created by the agent. Number 2 is situational freedom, but not from the agent's will. 3 is situational determinism by the agent's choices. And 4 is situational determinism not from the agent's will. Situational freedom created by the agent would be something like going to school and working your whole life and finally attaining a position of power that gives you more freedom than most people have. Situational freedom not created by the agent would be something like power that's handed down from generational wealth. That'd be a good example of it. Freedom is acquired by the agent that is not under the agent's control. So the third one, situational determinism by the agent's choices, would be something like drinking and getting into a car accident. You know, you are doing things that in your life that are not necessarily in your control, but and they build negative consequences in your life that are deterministic. Like your life becomes a determined effect of those choices. Situational determinism, not by the agent's choice, would be something like going down to the beach for the day and getting killed by a tsunami. You know, nothing you could have done would have prevented the deterministic situation from overtaking your will. I use ChatGPT 4.0 Mini quite a bit for a lot of things, and I call them BB8 because they seem like they have to have a name, and I don't want to call him Chat. I call him BB8. So BB8 says, The situation by which you have the most freedom is high origination. So when your freedom is handed to you and you're sort of lucky, that's low origination, high agency. You didn't create the situation, but you act within it. High origination and low freedom, you made choices that increase unfavorable deterministic outcomes, like drinking, and that leads to a car accident. Finally, zero origination and zero agency. The universe does what it does, and you got caught in the gears. I thought the AI output was cool. I'll put the image that it output at the end. It's kind of goofy, but I still think it's funny, and I don't want to put it in the main portion of the video. This basic breakdown is how I would go about tackling defining free will and determinism through description, rather than fixing them absolutely to concepts that never sort of resolve or they bounce back and forth. Let's talk about origination. To originate an act means to be the true source or ultimate initiator of it, not merely a link in a causal chain. It means the act is not just the inevitable result of prior causes, but arises from the agent in a meaningful, autonomous way. Determinism and the problem of origination. In deterministic systems where every event is the necessary outcome of prior causes, the agent does not originate actions in the deeper sense. They might perform the act, but they do not author it freely. Compatibilist versus incompatibilist views. Compatibilists say freedom doesn't require origination in the deep metaphysical sense. As long as you act according to your own motivations and desires, even if those are caused, you're free. Incompatibilists. Real freedom requires self-origination. If your actions don't originate in you independently of deterministic chains, you're not truly free. This leads to the dilemma of determinism. If determinism is true, you are not the origin of your acts. If indeterminism is true, your acts are random. So how can you ever be the genuine origin? Common sense tells us there's things going on beyond our control as individuals and beyond our control as a species. There's just so much chaos in human evolution that even if the entire universe were 99% determined, and even if the evolution of life goes along the same path time and time again, when you zoom out far enough and look at it, and you take into account environmental factors and life finding a way in extreme situations, the human mind seems to be so chaotic in itself in the moment, its constitution can be changed physically, and that leads to different outputs of the agent. We know this as a fact, so I think it's pretty obvious that radical determinism isn't a thing. It's also obvious that absolute freedom isn't a thing, except maybe a tiny sprinkle, depending on how you define it. If you exclude factors that are reasonably impossible, precluding, imagination as feeding into the definition of freedom, in other words, if I can't do anything that I can imagine with my mind, I'm not free, eliminate that. Even then, you still have to answer for deterministic powers that condition a situation that you have no control over. And also not enough power to avoid or nullify, the kinetics, the physical reality, the history of the situation. In my mind, you'd have to have an ultimate free will proof. You'd have to prove that you chose to be killed by the tsunami to prove a free will argument absolutely. I mean, what would you say in that situation where determinism overcame you and you had no possibility to escape it, and you had no really input into the situation other than you chose to go down to the beach? Are you going to blame the person that they unconsciously, they went to the beach like they always do for a schedule, and that was their choice, that was their freedom, and then there's water there and we know water kills? I mean, are you really going to say that? I mean, when improbable situations happen, and the determinism overcomes you beyond your control, when you're just doing everyday things that are normally safe, that's a deterministic situation. Determinism wins in the end if you're talking about the continuation of the agent or the individual. If that's the subject focus, where when the environment eliminates the continuity of the agent, the determinism wins. When you're judging it by, the continuation of the agent. I don't know. I think the free will in that situation becomes irrelevant. The choices that you went to the beach, you didn't expect to get killed. But I guess you could argue that you still had some freedom there. I mean, people know it's possible to drown. Oh, I don't know. I guess there's always room for discussion with this stuff, and but in my mind, that situational determinism determines that the moment was beyond your control and above your power to use your will to change things. I have the image up here that the AI made. It's kind of goofy. It's on the first one is a ladder. You know, you're creating your own ladder to climb to your goal. And the second one is a red carpet, right? That's when somebody else creates the situation by which you can be free, you know, like generational wealth. The third one in the bottom is, you know, you're in a cage, and that's supposed to represent when the choices that you make create a deterministic power in the situation that overcome any possible will. Or, you know, you could argue that it's the will that happens before the situation that generates the condition. And by the way, a lot of people always make that argument, even though a lot of things that happened to you in the past were beyond your control too. So the things that happened to you from the past that put you in a cage a lot of times are still things beyond your control, and they always have to be considered. And the fourth one is, you know, the wave. It's the situation that you go into innocently, where highly improbable situations create a deterministic situation that eliminates the continuity of the agent, which is ultimately the measure of a man is a man. So these situations are evaluated by what happens to the continuity of life or the agent. You know, we could switch around the context and talk about the life of the wave, and then, you know, freedom goes on, or, you know, because the context is now about the wave. But, you know, this channel, and I think the way people think morally, is about humanism, and then that will extend to all life, you know, animals, as we grasp it, as we're able to grasp basic humanism. I'm coding the site at civilsimian.com. It's a mess right now, but I've got, you know, a couple inputs, a proposition input, an issue solution input. And I'm using BB-8 to code that. And this is about the 8th time I've done this. I mean, I've built this site so many times, and I didn't have AI in the past. But now I've got AI, so it's really good at generating good appearing websites and creating the full stack of functionality. So it's really awesome. I mean, AI is so awesome, and the people that detract from it just don't understand what's going on with it. It's amazing, especially GPT 4.0 that's just come out. It's insanely amazing, especially for coding. Anyway, if you guys like this kind of philosophical subject matter, help us out by liking the video and subscribe to the channel.